All right, today we're going on what I like to call an intellectual salvage mission. We're about to dig up a radical philosophy that wasn't just forgotten, it was actively, and I'd argue unjustly, buried.
So let's just start with this question, because it's really the heart of the matter. What if a way of thinking, a philosophy that really shook the foundations of society, was considered so dangerous that the people in charge just decided it had to go away? This isn't just a dusty history lesson, it's more like a cold case about forbidden knowledge.
So let's start digging. First, we need to map out the core of this philosophy, what we're calling its anarchist logic. Now, when I say anarchist, I mean a way of thinking that rejects the whole idea of external authority, not just the government, but social rules, hierarchies, you name it. And you can see why that would be a direct threat to the established order. Now, when you hear the word cynic, you probably get a picture in your head of Diogenes living in a barrel, acting like some kind of public nuisance. And yeah, that's part of the story, but it's also a caricature, maybe one that was designed to make you look away. The real point is this: the Cynics weren't just a bunch of weirdos. They were the architects of a really powerful and coherent critique of society itself.
Okay, so if they were more than just provocateurs, what did they actually believe? Let's break down their radical code, the fundamentals of the Cynic worldview, so we can really get why it was seen as so revolutionary and, honestly, so dangerous.
At its heart, cynicism is all about this one simple but really profound idea: living according to nature. What does that mean? It means stripping away all the artificial junk that society piles on us. You know, the obsession with money, the hunger for power, all the endless social rules, and just getting back to a simpler, more authentic way of being.
And listen, they weren't messing around. This wasn't some half-hearted thing. They went all in. They threw out the whole idea of social status. They saw wealth as a total trap. They questioned the laws and morals that everyone else just accepted without a second thought. And they even waved away all that complex, abstract philosophy as just a pointless distraction from what really matters: living a good life right here and right now.
This quote right here from Diogenes, it's a bombshell. It just completely blows up the entire political structure of the ancient world. You know the story, right? Alexander the Great asks him where he's from, and he doesn't say Athens or Sinope. He says, "I am a citizen of the world." In a time that was completely defined by your loyalty to your city-state, that was an absolutely radical thing to say. It's this vision of humanity without borders, without states, and without any kind of tribal loyalty.
A vision like that doesn't just fly under the radar. It gets you noticed, and not in a good way, by the people running the show. So, why exactly was this philosophy seen as an active threat to civilization at the time? Let's take a closer look. So this chart basically lays out the whole conflict. It's a fundamental clash of worldviews. On one side, you've got the Cynics, who are all about individual freedom and a universal sense of humanity, and on the other, you have the big, dominant philosophies at the time, Platonism and Stoicism, which were all about social order, knowing your place, and your absolute duty to the city-state. I mean, these two ways of seeing the world just could not coexist. One of them had to win. And as we all know, when you can't beat an idea with a better argument, you attack its reputation. So let's pull back the curtain and look at the actual tactics that the philosophical establishment used to discredit cynicism and basically paint it as illegitimate. Here's the playbook. This is exactly how they did it. The Cynic ideal of living according to nature, that was deliberately twisted and mislabeled as being bestial or dog-like. In fact, the word cynic actually comes from the Greek word for dog. And the motive there is pretty obvious, right? Dehumanize your opponent so you can just dismiss their ideas. Their rejection of social rules was branded antisocial because that helped protect the existing hierarchy. And their simple public lifestyle, that was called shameless, all to frame natural human behavior as somehow dirty and uncivilized. It was nothing less than a systematic character assassination.
So after all this, what's the final verdict in our little intellectual cold case? What was the ultimate consequence of this incredibly effective smear campaign?
And here's the absolute key takeaway. The Cynics didn't lose the argument. There was no big debate where their ideas were proven wrong. No, what happened was their ethics were pushed to the margins. They were ridiculed. And in the end, they were suppressed by the dominant institutions that had a very clear interest in keeping things just the way they were. And the result of that is a huge loss for every single one of us. A major, truly radical branch of ethical thinking, one that questions the very foundations of power and social rules, was basically chopped off before it could ever fully blossom. All we're left with are these little fragments and a bunch of hostile accounts. Basically, a history written by the winners. Which, of course, leaves us with one last big question that kind of hangs in the air. The story of the Cynics is really a playbook for how powerful ideas can be buried for political reasons. And it really makes you wonder, what ideas that challenge our own status quo are being dismissed as antisocial or uncivilized today? And maybe more importantly, who exactly benefits when those ideas are suppressed?